Hey guys, what's up? Chef Hamill here, and today I am going to show you how to make a really delicious, healthy brownie recipe. So traditionally, brownies are not the healthiest. I hate to break it to you, which is why they're so delicious, but a lot of them have tons and tons of butter and sugar in them. So I'm going to try this recipe I found on Pinterest that seems very promising and has a lot of ingredients that you should have in your pantry, although I'm going to also provide you with some other substitutions in case you don't have all of these ingredients. So the base for our brownies is actually going to be chickpeas, which may seem scary to some people, but I promise you that you're not even going to taste them. And I baked with chickpeas before. I actually have a really great blondie recipe that I make, and you cannot even taste the chickpeas, and they're a really great substitution. Plus, they have a lot of added protein, and so it's a little bit healthier for you, which is great. There's also going to be nut butter in the recipe, so it calls for a half a cup. I happen to have this mixed nut butter, and it's kind of getting to the end of the jar. I gotten the jar from Costco, and I'm not really happy overall with the nut butter, so I'm just trying to use it up in my baking, but peanut butter would work just great. It also called for a half a cup of maple syrup. I don't have that much maple syrup, so I used a quarter cup of maple syrup and a quarter cup of honey that I had. You could also use agave syrup or any sort of liquid sugar that you have. It calls for a quarter cup of almond flour. I don't have almond flour, so I'm using oat flour just because I have it left over from something that I made and I'm trying to kind of use it up. And it also keeps it gluten-free, but obviously a quarter cup of all-purpose flour would work great as well. It also calls for a quarter cup of cocoa powder, a quarter teaspoon of baking powder, and a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. Quarter teaspoon of salt, because every baking recipe needs just a little bit of salt to balance out the sweetness. A quarter cup of vanilla extract, a tablespoon of melted coconut oil, which I happen to have, but any sort of neutral oil would work as well. Vegetable oil, canola oil, even olive oil, because it's such a small amount in the recipe. Of course, chocolate chips. You need chocolate chips and brownies. I'm using a half a cup. And then for the top, instead of using regular chocolate chips, I'm gonna use some peanut butter chips because chocolate and peanut butter go great together. So for this recipe, it could not be simpler because the batter is actually made in the food processor. You can use a blender as well. You could maybe make these by hand, but really the hardest part is going to be processing or mashing up the chickpeas. So it's probably going to be a little more effort if you make them by hand. So definitely if you have a food processor or blender, it's going to be better. So you're going to add your chickpeas that are drained and washed into the food processor with your nut butter or peanut butter. Make sure you use a rubber spatula to scrape out all of your little bowls. I have my quarter cup of maple syrup and my quarter cup of honey. If you're having trouble getting the maple syrup or the honey out of the containers that they come in, pop them in the microwave for 10-15 seconds until it softens, and it makes it a lot easier to come out. And my tablespoon of coconut oil melted. Perfect. I'm going to turn my food processor on, and we're looking for a smooth consistency, and then we can start adding our dry ingredients. You want to make sure you really process everything because you don't want any of the chunks of chickpeas left over. That looks good. So now we can start adding our dry ingredients. We have our almond flour, or I'm using oat flour, my cocoa powder, good thing I'm wearing an apron, my baking soda and baking powder, my salt, and my vanilla. Beautiful. And we're going to process this until it's really nice and smooth. One thing I also want to mention, if you were using regular all-purpose flour, make sure that you don't overmix this because you don't want your brownies to be tough. Overmixing flour, any sort of wheat flour, is what produces gluten, and gluten is what makes breads and different baked goods chewy and gives it that structure and texture that you're looking for. But in something like a cake or brownies or cookies, you don't want that chewy texture. So you want to make sure that you mix it the least amount as possible until it's combined. But because I'm using oat flour, it doesn't matter for this recipe. So that looks pretty good. I'm actually going to mix it just a little bit more. So now it's not really that much batter. I think I'm going to use this size pan. I'm trying to gauge. It should be good. Let's see. Does it say what size pan this is? Of course it's in centimeters. It says 25 by 15 by 4 centimeters. I'm trying to think of what that is in inches, but it's smaller than what is it, a 9 by 11 pan? But it's a smaller Pyrex dish than the usual size, because this isn't a lot of batter. You don't want to choose something that's too big because then they're going to be very thin. So I'm just going to spray this well with cooking spray. I don't want them to stick. And I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees. And these are going to bake for about 20 minutes or so. The thing with baking with chickpeas that I've noticed is that a lot of times the batter seems undercooked, but it will set the longer that it sits when it comes out of the oven. So don't be too antsy and try to dig into these because it's going to be really chewy and kind of fall apart. So you definitely want to let them sit until they almost come to room temperature so that they fully set. So I'm going to mix in my chocolate chips by hand so that I don't process them and get them all small. I want to have those nice chunks of chocolate chips. And I'm going to do my best to spread this out in my pan as thin of an even layer as possible. Obviously, you don't want them to be too thin. So again, like I said, make sure you choose a container or a cooking vessel that you think will be the best. You could use a cookie sheet, but I wanted something with higher sides so that I get a really fudgy, soft brownie, which is my favorite. And I have no chocolate in my house, so this is really going to curb that chocolate craving I've been having. Alrighty. Make sure you get all the batter. You don't want any of it wasted. You don't want any of this goodness left behind. Plus, then you have more to clean. So why not get it all in the recipe like it's supposed to be? There we go. Alrighty. So I'm just gonna spread this out as best I can. Want it nice and even, so that thickness, so that it bakes evenly. I'm actually super excited to taste the final result. Like I said, I've made blondies with the chickpeas before, which is a recipe that I absolutely love. So I'm really, really interested to see how these brownies come out. And I will post the recipe in the description for both these brownies and the blondies. And for those wondering what a blondie is a brownie without the cocoa powder, essentially. And they're absolutely amazing. So good. Pretty much like a chocolate chip cookie in brownie form. Alrighty, so that looks good. So I'm going to add my peanut butter chips on top. Yum. So good. And once these are all good, I'm gonna actually press in these chocolate chips a little bit, or these peanut butter chips, because I don't want them to burn. Obviously they will melt a little in the oven, but I want to make sure they really get into the brownie. Beautiful. So I'm going to pop these in the oven, and then I'll let you know what the final product looks like. What's up, guys? Welcome back. These are our finished brownies, which came out absolutely amazing. So they cooked for about 20 minutes in a 350-degree oven, and then I took a toothpick and poked them, and they came out completely clean. So they will feel soft when they come out, but like I said, make sure you put them on a cooling rack so that they can cool for about 20 to 30 minutes, or if not a little bit longer, before you cut them. So these have been cooling, so I'm going to cut them up to show you what the inside looks like. But first, I want to show you what they look like close up. They look really nice. They look just like a regular brownie. You can kind of see from the side, might be a little hard to see on the camera, that they did cook and rise a little bit just like a regular brownie would. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to cut these up and put them on this really nice plate for you to see. Well, they definitely did not stick, which is great. So I'm going to cut these small so that when I want a little bite of something sweet, I can just take a little bite and not feel super guilty. Now, like I said, the texture is going to be a little bit different, of course, than a traditional brownie, because it's not a traditional brownie. But I could already tell from these that these are going to be so great and so fudgy. Oh my goodness, they look so good. Use a little rubber spatula to scoop them out. Oh my goodness, they look so good. I'm so excited. So I'm gonna plate these up. And after I have dinner, you better believe I'm gonna have one of these for dessert. Oh my goodness. Growing up, I wasn't really the biggest chocolate person. My aunt can tell you that she always tried to get me to be a chocoholic, and I always resisted, and I was always a vanilla lover. But I have to say, the older I get, the more and more I love chocolate and I appreciate chocolate. So these are definitely going to hit the spot. I am super, super excited for these. And they're very fudgy on the inside, just like a regular brownie is. So that is the best part. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. So these are the finished brownies. They look absolutely amazing. They're super fudgy, really, really soft, and really chocolatey in flavor. The peanut butter chips definitely look absolutely delicious in this recipe, so I'm super excited to try these after dinner. Of course, if you didn't have peanut butter chips, regular chocolate chips, walnuts, almonds, pecans, even shredded coconut would be great on top of these brownies. And like always, if you have any questions or concerns, please comment below. I am going to put the recipe for this brownie recipe and the Blondie recipe I was talking about earlier in the description. And thank you so much for watching.